Have you ever asked yourself, where did I truly begin? Not the day you were born, not your childhood memories, but before all that, before anyone knew your name. You see, your story didn't begin with breath. It began in complete silence. In a place hidden from all eyes, you were forming. You, who would one day speak, think, laugh, and cry, began as something so small, so fragile, it couldn't even be seen without a microscope. It started with a single cell, microscopic, weightless, seemingly insignificant, and then another. Two different cells, on two separate paths, met. In that sacred collision, something unbelievable happened. They didn't just connect, they created, and that creation was you. Not the version of you sitting here now, but the very first spark, the possibility of your existence. From that union, a new single cell was formed. This wasn't just biology, it was the beginning of life. Not a full person, not a conscious being, but a whisper of potential. And what did that cell do next? It multiplied, rapidly. 1 became 2, 2 became 4, 4 became 8. In days, you were a cluster of cells, dividing with purpose. Not randomly, not chaotically, with direction, with meaning. You didn't drift aimlessly through space. You traveled down a path, one that led you to the wall of the uterus. And there, you reached out and clung. Not with hands, not with strength, but with design. Implantation, they call it. But that word feels too mechanical, too cold. What happened wasn't just a process. It was a moment of belonging. This was the first time your body anchored itself to the world. The first time your life said, I'm here. I'm staying. And somehow, in ways science still can't fully explain, you began shaping yourself from the inside out. For centuries, people didn't understand this. They couldn't see it, couldn't track it. But now, with advanced imaging, we can watch the earliest days of human development. And what we see is stunning. We see how that tiny implanted form begins folding, curling, organizing itself. We see tissues forming. We see a structure beginning to rise out of what once looked like nothing. What's even more remarkable, descriptions of this development, of the stages your body went through, were written down over 1400 years ago. At a time when no one could have possibly known. Back then, no microscope existed, no scans, no embryology textbooks, and yet, the exact sequence, the clinging form, the stage that looks like chewed flesh, the formation of bones before muscles, was already documented. How? How could someone know what the inside of the womb looked like, before the human eye ever saw it? That's the question, and it leads to a bigger one. What if your story didn't start with science? What if it started with knowledge? A knowledge far beyond human limitation. What if you were seen long before you were visible? Every cell in your body multiplied with intention. Every moment of division, of growth, was orchestrated. And yet, you didn't know. You didn't ask to exist. You didn't control the shape of your hands, the rhythm of your heart, the depth of your eyes. It all happened, as if someone was crafting you from the inside. There's a word for that. Design. You were not an accident. You were not a coincidence. You were made, not just out of atoms or DNA, but out of mercy, out of purpose. So the next time you look at yourself in the mirror and wonder, am I enough? Do I matter? Was I really meant to be here? Remember this. You are the result of a journey that began long before anyone ever knew your name. You are not just a person. You are a process. You are a story that started in silence, but was always meant to be heard. From the moment you anchored yourself in the womb, your transformation became relentless. What once looked like a random ball of cells began to take shape. Not haphazardly, not without direction. Every fold, every curve, every rise and dip in the forming body had a purpose. It followed a blueprint older than time. Let's pause for a moment. Ask yourself, how does a cell, barely a whisper of matter, know to become an eye? Or a heart? Or the fingerprints that no other human on Earth will ever have? The answer isn't just biology. It's something deeper, something more elegant. It's design. At this stage of development, you are still small, about the size of a grain of rice. And yet, you were undergoing an orchestration of changes that no human mind could engineer. Your cells began to organize. Some of them would become your brain. Others would become your spine, your arms, your face. This wasn't guesswork. It was choreography. And all of this dance of life, was happening inside a dark, protected chamber. No eyes could see you. No voice could call your name. And yet, you were becoming you. Then something strange happened. Your form began to resemble something almost otherworldly. Science now calls this the somite stage, when segments of tissue begin forming along your back. You looked curled, slightly hunched, your features not yet distinct. And if someone were to look at you then, they might describe your shape as irregular, as if chewed or folded. It's not poetic, but it's accurate. And centuries ago, before such things could ever be witnessed, that stage was described perfectly. Down to the shape, down to the sequence. First the bones, then the muscles, then the skin to wrap it all. This was said long before imaging or measurement was even possible. But let's return to you, to the marvel happening inside your forming body. Bones began to form. Tiny threads of cartilage turned solid. Your skeleton was being woven. And then, as if to protect what was now sturdy, muscles wrapped around them. Flesh followed. Then your skin. A layer that would carry the marks of your life for decades to come. In just a few weeks, you had gone from invisible to human-shaped. Not fully developed, not yet breathing, but undeniably a being. Isn't that strange? You didn't have thoughts yet. You couldn't speak. You couldn't dream. And still, you mattered. You were protected, cared for, monitored, without your awareness. Why? Why would something so small, so quiet, so unseen, be so protected? Because your value wasn't based on your productivity. It wasn't based on your talents or your potential. It was based on one thing. You existed. And that was enough. Even now, we live in a world that often tells us our worth is measured by our output, our achievements, our looks, our intelligence. But your earliest moments say otherwise. You were valuable before you ever spoke a word. You were cherished before you were even born. And here's the part that might leave you breathless. Every single detail of your body, from the tilt of your nose to the curve of your fingers, was programmed in a language more complex than anything humans have created. DNA, a code, invisible to the eye, yet carrying more data than any computer chip on Earth. That code was not designed by you. You inherited it, yes, but you didn't write it. So who did? You can call it nature. You can call it evolution. Or, you can call it what your heart already suspects. Intent. You were intended. And this intention didn't stop at your shape. It continued in your senses. Your ears began forming. You wouldn't hear anything yet, not clearly. But the pathways were forming. Preparing. Your eyes were sealed shut, but the lens and retina were developing. Your skin was paper thin, but nerves were forming underneath, ready to feel. Think about that. Before you could interact with the world, your body was preparing to experience it. It's almost as if something, or someone, knew you were going to need these things. Not just to survive, but to live. To see beauty. To hear love. To feel warmth. You weren't being built like a machine. You were being crafted for connection. Even your heart. It began beating before you could ever understand what love was. It thumped in the silence, pumping life through your veins. Not because you asked it to, but because life wanted to reach you. And it did. Thousands of new neurons connected in your brain every second. Pathways were being paved in silence, preparing for thought, memory, emotion. And yet, you remained hidden. Still inside the womb. Still untouched by the world. But no longer invisible. Your story was no longer just potential. It was movement. It was memory being written without words. And all of it, every last detail, was happening for you. Not a generic human. Not a statistic. But you. This is the moment where science begins to get quiet. Where data bows to mystery. Because what's happening here can't be fully explained in charts or graphs. What's happening is sacred. The shaping of a soul. The crafting of a person. Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. And the most breathtaking part? You didn't do anything to earn it. You simply were. And that was enough. There comes a point in the womb, after the bones have formed, the muscles have wrapped around them, the skin has settled into place, when something shifts. Everything up until now has been physical, tangible, visible under a microscope. But then, something unseen enters the story. The body has formed. The organs are in place. The heart beats. The limbs move. But this body, complete as it seems, is missing something. Awareness. This is the point where science falls silent. Biologists can trace cell growth. They can identify organs, measure neural activity, and count heartbeats. But they cannot explain the moment when that cluster of tissue becomes someone. Not something. Someone. Because what makes you, isn't just your bones, your skin, your blood. It's the unseen reality inside you. The soul. You don't remember when yours arrived. No one does. It came quietly, not with a flash or a sound, but with a whisper, a transition from form to self, from potential to person. And once it happened, you were no longer just a body in progress. You were alive in a way that science still doesn't fully understand. Because what is consciousness? Where does emotion come from? How does memory even begin? No machine has ever created those things. No microscope has ever captured them. But they are real. They are the parts of you that can't be measured, yet define your every moment. From this moment forward, your development changes. You start to respond. To touch. To temperature. To sound. Your fingers curl in response to sensation. Your tiny mouth makes sucking movements. Your eyelids flutter, though your eyes have not yet seen light. And most mysteriously, you begin to hear. Not clearly, not like you do now. But muffled sounds begin to reach you through the liquid that surrounds you. The beat of a heart. The murmur of voices. And more often than not, silence. But even silence teaches. It calms. It soothes. Your brain is now creating connections at a breathtaking pace. Neurons firing. Signals forming. Patterns developing. You're building the foundation for everything you'll later remember, feel, believe. But here's the miracle. Even before you have thoughts, you are already known. Even before you can speak, you are already spoken to. Even before you can love, you are already loved. You have never, not for a second, been unseen. Because the moment your soul entered your body, your worth became infinite. Not because of what you could do, not because of what you would become, but because you simply were, and still are. Think about how much preparation went into just this stage of your life. You were fed through an umbilical cord designed just for you. Your temperature was regulated, your position adjusted, your environment perfectly tailored to your needs. Why? Why would so much care be taken? for someone who couldn't even say thank you. Because love doesn't require reciprocity. Not real love, not the kind that's written into your design. You were carried, sustained, protected, and in all that time, you never once needed to earn it. This is what it means to be given life. Not to take it, not to win it, but to receive it, as a gift, one that began with a single cell, and now holds a soul. That soul, your soul, is what connects you to something greater than yourself. It's what longs for meaning. It's what aches when the world feels hollow. It's what searches for answers in the quiet moments of your life. And perhaps, deep down, it's what led you here. To this moment, to these words, to remembering that you were not made to simply exist. You were made to live aware, to live as a soul inside a body, not a body searching for a soul. You are more than your past, more than your appearance, more than your achievements or your failures. You are, and always have been, a soul in motion. And that motion began long before you had memories. It began the moment the unseen entered the scene. The eternal entered the temporary. And you became more than biology. You became you. For months, you existed in a world of silence. Not the silence of loneliness, but the silence of safety. Wrapped in warmth, suspended in liquid, surrounded by a darkness that didn't frighten, but protected. Every heartbeat, every stretch of your limbs, every flutter of your eyelids was part of something ancient. Something intentional. This was not chaos. This was choreography. And then, as you grew, something within you, without you even knowing, began to prepare for a change. A shift. An ending that would become a beginning. You didn't ask for it. You couldn't plan it. But your body, your mother's body, and the universe itself, began to move toward your arrival. And for the first time since your story began, things got uncomfortable. The space grew tight. The warmth shifted. The silence began to fade. You didn't know it, but a world was waiting for you. Not just a room, not just a crib, but a world filled with sound, with faces, with air. For the first time, you would breathe. Not through a cord, not through fluid, but through lungs that had never touched oxygen. That's not a transition. That's a miracle. And so, the moment came. You were pushed, squeezed, pressed into a tunnel that felt unfamiliar and terrifying. It hurt. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't quiet. But it was sacred. Because for the first time, your body moved into a world that could see you. You cried. You gasped. You opened lungs that had been rehearsing for weeks. You screamed into existence. And everyone around you smiled. But here's the truth that no one tells you. You were seen before that moment. Seen by eyes that don't tire. Loved by a mercy that doesn't sleep. Held by a will that shaped you long before anyone knew your name. From a drop of fluid, you became a body. From a body, you became a soul. And from a soul, you became a story that continues today. You may not remember the darkness of the womb, but your life remembers the shaping. You may not recall your first heartbeat, but your body carries its rhythm. And you may not know how every part of you came together. But someone does. Every cell, every breath, every blink of your eyes. None of it was an accident. You were not an accident. You were not random. You were not forgotten. You were not late. You were not too early. You were meant. And maybe, just maybe, that's what you needed to hear right now. Because life outside the womb gets loud. There are days you feel small again. Unseen. Insignificant. There are moments you forget that your beginning was sacred. That your existence carries meaning, even when you feel lost. But the truth is, nothing about you is ordinary. You were designed. You were carried. You were protected. And now, you are here, with a heart that beats. with lungs that breathe, with a soul that still remembers what it means to be held by something unseen. So when you feel like life is spinning too fast, pause, close your eyes, and remember, there was a time when you were surrounded by complete darkness, and even then, you were not alone. There was a time when your body didn't even know how to speak, and still, you were heard. There was a time when you couldn't even move on your own, and yet, you were carried. So what does that tell you about now? It tells you that you've always been guided. Even when it didn't feel like it. Even when the path was unclear. You weren't placed here to wander in confusion. You were born into a world that forgets the miracle of being born. But you don't have to. You can choose to remember. To reconnect. To realign. To understand that your worth has never come from titles, or money, or attention. It came from the moment your soul entered a body in the dark, and you were seen. Fully, lovingly, completely. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, unworthy, or uncertain, remember your beginning. A beginning filled with silence, but never emptiness. A beginning that knew your name before anyone else did. A beginning that was recorded, remembered, cherished, because you were always meant to be. And as your story moves beyond the womb, into this vast, noisy world, don't forget where it all began. You weren't born empty. You were born from care, from precision, from intention. You were whispered into being, shaped in stillness, guided without needing to understand. So now, when things feel uncertain, when life pulls you in every direction, when the noise outside drowns out the quiet inside, pause, breathe, remember, you were known before you were seen. You were loved before you could love back. You were watched over long before you learned the meaning of protection. That kind of beginning isn't random. It's a message, a reminder that your life carries weight, even when it feels light. That your presence matters, even when it feels forgotten. So if this video touched something deep within you, if it made you feel, even just for a second, that you are more than what the world sees, then let it echo. Speech balloon, leave a comment, even if it's just one word. Write, seen, or still held, or anything you felt. Because sometimes, a small word in the dark can remind someone else that they are not alone. Thumbs up like the video if it helped you breathe a little easier. Bell subscribe if you want more stories like this. Not just information, but reminders of who you are and why you matter. And know this, you don't need to do or achieve anything to be worthy of love. You already are, you always were, and you always will be. Until next time, stay grounded, stay remembered, stay loved, and as your story moves beyond the womb, into this vast, noisy world, don't forget where it all began. You weren't born empty. You were born from care, from precision, from intention. You were whispered into being, shaped in stillness, guided without needing to understand. So now, when things feel uncertain, when life pulls you in every direction, when the noise outside drowns out the quiet inside, pause, breathe, remember, you were known before you were seen. You were loved before you could love back. You were watched over long before you learned the meaning of protection. That kind of beginning isn't random. It's a message, a reminder that your life carries weight, even when it feels light. That your presence matters, even when it feels forgotten. So if this video touched something deep within you, if it made you feel, even just for a second, that you are more than what the world sees, then let it echo. Speech balloon, leave a comment, even if it's just one word. Write, seen, or still held, or anything you felt. Because sometimes, a small word in the dark can remind someone else that they are not alone. Thumbs up like the video if it helped you breathe a little easier. Bell subscribe if you want more stories like this. Not just information, but reminders of who you are and why you matter. And know this, you don't need to do or achieve anything to be worthy of love. You already are, you always were, and you always will be. Until next time, stay grounded, stay remembered, stay loved.